The wing ripped off at 22,000 feet. The plane was dying. The pilots had one shot left before everyone died. Then a passenger stood up, Russia's most dangerous test pilot. She took the controls. Minutes later, 6 Black Hawks formed an escort. They knew, she was attempting the impossible. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. Nadia Volkov looked like any other business traveler that Tuesday morning. She sat in seat 9A, first class, wearing a nice charcoal gray suit and reading glasses perched on her nose. Her laptop displayed complex aerospace engineering diagrams, the kind of boring technical stuff that made the wealthy businessman in seat 9B yawn and look away. The flight attendant who served her coffee that morning would later tell reporters that the woman seemed completely ordinary. Professional. Quiet. Polite. Maybe a little tired, but who isn't tired at LAX at 6 a.m.? Nobody on United Flight 447 had any idea who she really was. 8 years ago, Nadia wasn't Nadia Roth, aerospace consultant from Pasadena, California. She was Colonel Nadia Raven Volkov, one of the Russian Federation's most skilled and decorated test pilots. For 15 years, she flew aircraft that should have killed her on the first flight. The Gromov Flight Research Institute outside Moscow was where the Soviet Union, and later Russia, tested every experimental aircraft before it entered production. It was also where they tested failure modes. How does a MiG-29 handle when one aileron is completely destroyed? What happens to a Su-27 when you lose all hydraulic pressure at Mach 1.5? Can a pilot recover from a complete engine failure during a vertical climb? To answer these questions, Russian engineers would deliberately damage perfectly good aircraft, then send test pilots up to see what happened. Most test pilots refused these missions. The mortality rate was horrible. Between 1985 and 2010, 14 Russian test pilots died flying deliberately damaged aircraft. Nadia volunteered for every single one. She flew jets with missing control surfaces. Aircraft with asymmetric thrust, one engine at full power, the other completely dead. She flew planes with damaged wings, broken hydraulics, failed electrical systems. She flew aircraft that were, by every engineering calculation, unflyable. And she brought them back. Her call sign, Raven, came from her seemingly supernatural ability to fly dead aircraft, planes that should spiral into the ground but somehow stayed airborne under her hands. Russian engineers started calling her Voron, the Raven, because ravens are the only birds that can fly in Category 5 hurricanes. They can navigate through chaos that kills every other creature in the sky. Nadia had a gift. She could feel what an aircraft needed. She could sense the balance points, the edge cases, the tiny moments where physics allowed something impossible to become barely possible. By 2015, she had logged more hours in deliberately damaged aircraft than any pilot in human history. The Russian Air Force promoted her to colonel and made her chief test pilot for the entire Gromov Institute. They trusted her completely. That was their mistake. In early 2016, Nadia was assigned to test Russia's next-generation fighter jet, the Su-57. The aircraft had revolutionary flight control systems that used artificial intelligence to make split-second adjustments that human pilots couldn't match. Nadia spent 6 months testing the prototypes. She learned every detail of the new systems. She memorized the classified algorithms, the control logic, the software architecture. Then, on March 15, 2016, she stole a MiG-29 from the test facility and flew it across the border into Azerbaijan before anyone could stop her. She carried with her complete technical specifications for the Su-57's flight control systems on encrypted thumb drives hidden in her flight suit. U.S. intelligence had been trying to get that information for 5 years. Nadia delivered it on a silver platter. The CIA extracted her from Azerbaijan within 6 hours. They flew her to a safe house in Germany, then to another in Virginia, then finally to a permanent relocation in California. They gave her asylum. A new identity. A new life. A job as an aerospace consultant for Boeing and Lockheed Martin, where her knowledge of Russian systems was worth millions. She became Nadia Roth. New passport. New social security number. New driver's license. New everything. For 8 years, she lived quietly in Pasadena. She worked from home mostly, occasionally traveled to Boeing facilities in Seattle or Lockheed plants in Georgia. She made good money, 6 figures plus bonuses. She bought a nice 2-bedroom house with a view of the mountains. She sometimes gave guest lectures at Caltech about aerospace engineering, always careful never to mention her real background. She dated occasionally but never seriously. She had a few friends but kept them at arm's length. She went to the gym, took yoga classes, learned to cook Thai food, adopted a cat named Pushkin. To anyone watching, Nadia Roth lived a perfectly normal, slightly boring American life. But Nadia knew the truth that kept her awake at night: Russia never stops hunting traitors. The GRU, Russian military intelligence, has a long memory and infinite patience. They had killed defectors in London with radioactive poison. In Berlin with car bombs. In Vienna with staged heart attacks. Some defectors lasted 20 years before the GRU found them. Some lasted only 2. Nadia took precautions. She changed her legal name. She varied her travel patterns religiously, never flying the same route twice in 6 months. She used cash instead of credit cards when possible. She had 3 different cell phones that she rotated weekly. She never posted on social media, never appeared in photographs if she could avoid it, never gave interviews. For 8 years, it worked. She disappeared into American suburban life like a ghost. But she made one mistake. Today, she had to fly commercial from Los Angeles to Denver for an emergency Boeing meeting. She checked in under her legal name, Nadia Roth, using her legitimate California driver's license and her real passport. She went through TSA security at LAX Terminal 7 at 5:47 a.m., passing directly under 3 security cameras. What Nadia didn't know, what U.S. intelligence didn't know until later, was that Russian intelligence had been running advanced facial recognition software on every security camera in every major U.S. airport for the past 3 years. The system captured millions of faces daily. It compared them against a database of 847 high-value targets that Russia wanted dead. Nadia Volkov was number 3 on that list. At 5:48 a.m., the facial recognition system got a 94% confidence match. At 5:52 a.m., the alert reached GRU headquarters in Moscow. At 5:59 a.m., 3 Russian intelligence operatives in Los Angeles received encrypted orders: eliminate Raven. Make it look accidental. They had 47 minutes before Flight 447 took off. United Flight 447 pushed back from Gate 71 at LAX at 6:46 a.m., 3 minutes ahead of schedule. Captain Sarah Mitchell, 52 years old, 26 years flying commercial jets, 18,000 hours in the air, was in command. This was supposed to be an easy flight, LAX to Denver, 2 hours, perfect weather. After this flight, she had 3 days off. Her daughter Emily was graduating from UC Berkeley on Saturday. Sarah had the whole weekend planned: graduation ceremony, family dinner, a trip to Napa Valley. First Officer Marcus Webb, 34 years old, 12 years flying, 8,000 hours logged, sat in the right seat. This was his 3rd flight of a 4-day rotation. After Denver, he had one more leg to San Francisco, then he was done for the week. He was thinking about taking his wife to Lake Tahoe for their anniversary. Neither of them would make their plans. The Boeing 737-900 lifted off runway 25L at 7:02 a.m. and climbed smoothly into clear morning skies. In the cabin, 183 passengers settled in for the flight. Business travelers opened laptops. Families with small children broke out iPads and coloring books. A couple on their honeymoon held hands across the armrest. In seat 9A, Nadia opened her laptop and pulled up the files she needed to review for the Denver meeting, stress analysis reports for Boeing's new 777X wing design. Boring but necessary work. The businessman in 9B was already on his phone, illegally, since they hadn't reached 10,000 feet, talking loudly about a real estate deal in Scottsdale. Nadia put in earbuds to block him out. Flight 447 climbed through 10,000 feet, then 15,000, then 20,000. At 7:37 a.m., they leveled off at their cruising altitude of 22,000 feet. Marcus was flying. Sarah was monitoring instruments and thinking about what restaurant to book for Emily's graduation dinner. Everything was perfectly normal. 32 miles away, at a small private airfield outside Palmdale, California, 3 men in a white van activated a military-grade drone. The drone was Chinese-made, modified with Russian electronics, and purchased through black market channels in Mexico 6 months earlier. It cost $180,000 and could fly at speeds up to 200 miles per hour with precision GPS guidance. The men programmed coordinates into the drone's navigation system, coordinates that placed it on a collision course with United Flight 447. The drone launched at 7:38 a.m. It climbed rapidly to 22,000 feet, its electric motors nearly silent, its radar cross-section tiny enough to avoid detection by civilian air traffic control. At 7:39 a.m., the drone's onboard camera acquired its target, a Boeing 737 with United Airlines livery, registration number N73283, flying at bearing 047 at 22,000 feet. The drone adjusted course. In the cockpit of Flight 447, neither Sarah nor Marcus saw it coming. At 7:39 and 47 seconds a.m., the drone struck the left wing of United Flight 447 at a relative velocity of 412 miles per hour. The impact was catastrophic. The drone's titanium frame and the aircraft's aluminum wing structure met in a millisecond collision that released energy equivalent to a small bomb. The wing didn't just crack or puncture, it sheared completely off at the wing root, the structural failure propagating along the wing spar in a cascading fracture that took less than 3 seconds. 40 feet of wing, complete with fuel tanks and a 27,000-pound thrust CFM56 turbofan engine, separated from the aircraft and tumbled toward the desert floor 6 miles below. Inside the cabin, the impact felt like the plane had been hit by a freight train. Nadia's laptop flew out of her hands and slammed into the seat in front of her hard enough to crack the screen. The businessman in 9B was thrown against his seatbelt so violently that he cracked 2 ribs. Overhead bins burst open, raining luggage and duty-free shopping bags onto passengers' heads. People screamed. In the cockpit, every warning alarm activated simultaneously. The master warning lights, red and urgent, lit up like a Christmas tree. Fire warning left engine. Structural damage. Hydraulic system A failure. Hydraulic system B failure. Flight control malfunction. Stall warning. Sarah Mitchell grabbed the radio, her voice professional despite the terror in her eyes. Mayday, mayday, mayday. United 447, we've had an explosion on the left. She stopped mid-sentence. Marcus was staring out the cockpit window, his face gone white with shock. Sarah, the wing. Sarah looked. Through the cockpit window, where there should have been 40 feet of gracefully curved wing stretching out to the left engine nacelle, there was nothing. Just empty air. And below, tumbling away through the sky, she could see the severed wing section falling, trailing fuel vapor and debris. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Oh my God, the wing is gone." "That's impossible," Marcus said, but even as he said it, he knew it wasn't. He could see it with his own eyes. The Boeing 737 had lost its entire left wing. The aircraft immediately rolled violently to the left. Basic aerodynamics: an aircraft flies because its wings generate lift. When both wings generate equal lift, the plane flies straight and level. When one wing generates more lift than the other, the plane rolls toward the side with less lift. When one wing is completely missing, the imbalance is catastrophic. The remaining right wing was generating approximately 70,000 pounds of lift. The left side was generating 0. The aircraft rolled left at a rate of 15 degrees per second, fast enough that Marcus and Sarah could feel themselves being thrown against their seatbelts as the plane tilted. Marcus grabbed the control yoke with both hands and pulled hard to the right, trying to counteract the roll. Sarah. We're rolling. I can't hold it. Sarah snapped out of her shock and grabbed her yoke, adding her strength to his. Together they pulled with every ounce of force they had. The plane's roll rate slowed but didn't stop. 30 degrees left bank. 35 degrees. 40 degrees. Deploy spoilers on the right wing. Sarah shouted. We need to kill some lift on the good side. Marcus reached for the spoiler controls, panels on top of the wing that could be raised to disrupt airflow and reduce lift. His hand hit the switch. Nothing happened. No hydraulics, he yelled. The impact severed the hydraulic lines. Everything's manual control only. Manual control on a 737 means the pilots have to physically move the control surfaces using cables and pulleys, possible for the rudder and elevators, almost impossible for the ailerons without hydraulic assist. They were fighting 175,000 pounds of aircraft with pure muscle power. Sarah's arms were already burning from the effort. We can't hold this. We're going over. The altimeter was spinning backwards. 21,500 feet. 21,000 feet. 20,500 feet. They were falling at 2,200 feet per minute, more than 25 miles per hour straight down, and accelerating. The plane rolled past 45 degrees. Marcus was pulling so hard on the yoke that his hands were cramping. Tears were streaming down his face from the strain and the terror and the absolute certainty that he was about to die along with 183 passengers. Sarah, I can't. I can't hold it anymore. Don't you let go. Sarah screamed. Don't you dare let go. 50 degrees left bank. 55 degrees. Then the plane shuddered violently, a deep, structural vibration that they could feel in their bones. The airframe was experiencing stress loads it was never designed to handle. Asymmetric aerodynamic forces were trying to twist the fuselage apart. Through the shattered remains of the left wing root, they could see torn metal, severed hydraulic lines spraying fluid, exposed wiring sparking in the slipstream. And then, in the mess of falling debris, Sarah saw it, the distinctive carbon fiber frame and electronic components of a military drone. We were hit, she gasped. Marcus, we were hit by a drone. It flew right into our wing. She never finished the sentence. A jagged piece of metal, a razor-sharp fragment from the destroyed drone's titanium frame, came through the cockpit windshield moving at several hundred miles per hour. It hit Captain Sarah Mitchell in the upper chest, just below her collarbone. She died instantly, her body slumping forward over the control yoke. Marcus screamed her name. Sarah. Sarah, no. But she was gone. And now Marcus was alone, fighting a crippled aircraft that was rolling past 60 degrees with no hydraulics, no help, and 183 people in the cabin behind him screaming for their lives. The altimeter showed 19,000 feet and falling fast. Marcus knew with absolute certainty that he had less than 3 minutes before the plane rolled completely inverted and entered an unrecoverable spin. He was going to die. They were all going to die. In seat 9A, Nadia Volkov felt the impact and knew immediately what had happened. Not specifically, she didn't know it was a drone strike, didn't know it was an assassination attempt. But she knew the plane had lost a wing. 15 years of flying deliberately damaged aircraft had given her an instinct for catastrophic damage. The way the plane rolled, the violence of the impact, the specific vibration frequency of structural failure, she'd felt it all before in Soviet test jets. Around her, passengers were screaming. A man across the aisle was vomiting from terror. A woman behind her was praying loudly in Spanish. Two teenagers in the row ahead were crying and holding each other. The plane was tilted at more than 40 degrees to the left. Oxygen masks had deployed from the overhead panels, dangling and swaying. The cabin lights flickered. Nadia unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up. It was difficult. The plane's extreme bank angle meant she was essentially standing on a tilted floor. It felt like trying to walk on a steep hillside. She grabbed seat backs and pulled herself forward, climbing uphill through the tilted cabin toward the cockpit. A flight attendant, a young woman named Jessica who had been working for United for only 8 months, saw her moving and rushed over, her face pale with fear. "Ma'am. Get back in your seat. We're in an emergency." Nadia looked at her calmly. "I know. I'm a pilot. I can help." "You're a what?" "A test pilot. Russian Air Force. 15 years flying damaged aircraft. Let me into that cockpit." Jessica stared at this middle-aged woman in a business suit making an absolutely insane claim. I can't just let you into the cockpit. There are rules." The plane rolled past 50 degrees. A luggage bin broke free from its hinges and crashed into the aisle. "Your rules just died," Nadia shouted. "If you don't let me in that cockpit right now, everyone on this plane dies in the next 2 minutes. Do you understand?" Jessica looked into Nadia's eyes and saw something that made her decision easy: absolute confidence. This woman wasn't panicking. She wasn't guessing. She knew. Jessica grabbed the intercom handset and punched in the emergency code. "Flight deck, I'm sending someone up. She says she's a pilot. She says she can help." No response from the cockpit. Jessica used her emergency override key on the cockpit door. It clicked open. Nadia pushed through. The scene inside was worse than she'd expected. Captain Mitchell was slumped over the left side control yoke, blood soaking her uniform shirt. First Officer Marcus Webb was fighting the right side controls alone, his face contorted with effort, tears and sweat streaming down his face, his arms shaking visibly from the physical strain. The cockpit was a chaos of alarms. Every warning light was illuminated. The master caution panel looked like a Christmas tree. The audible warnings, stall alert, terrain warning, pull up, were so loud Nadia could barely think. "Get out!" Marcus screamed without looking at her. "I don't have time for passengers. Get back to your seat. I'm Colonel Nadia Volkov, Russian Air Force test pilot." Nadia shouted over the alarms. "I've flown aircraft with asymmetric damage. I know how to do this." Marcus finally looked at her. His eyes were wild, desperate, on the edge of complete breakdown. "You're a what?" "Asymmetric flight control. One wing missing or severely damaged. I trained for this for 15 years at Gromov Flight Research Institute. Let me help you. This is a commercial 737 with one wing completely gone." Marcus shouted. "It's not flyable. There's no procedure for this. There's no." The plane rolled past 60 degrees. Marcus's grip on the yoke was slipping. His hands were cramping, his arms were failing. Nadia didn't ask permission again. She grabbed Captain Mitchell's body, still warm, still bleeding, and pulled her out of the captain's seat with strength born from pure adrenaline. She wasn't gentle. There was no time to be gentle. She slid into the blood-soaked left seat. Her hands found the control yoke. Her feet found the rudder pedals. And something fundamental changed in the cockpit. Nadia's face, which had been tight with urgency, became perfectly calm. Her breathing, which had been fast and shallow, became slow and controlled. The frantic energy drained out of her and was replaced by something Marcus had never seen in another pilot: absolute, total confidence. This wasn't fear anymore. This wasn't even bravery. This was what Nadia Volkov was born to do. "Let go of the yoke," she told Marcus quietly, her Russian accent thick now. Are you insane? Marcus shouted. If I let go, we'll roll inverted in 3 seconds. Trust me. Let go. I don't know you. I don't know if you're really a pilot or if you're just. Marcus. Nadia's voice cut through his panic like a knife. Look at me. He looked. Her eyes were steady. Calm. Certain. I have flown MiG-29s with one aileron completely destroyed, she said. I have flown Su-27s with asymmetric thrust at Mach 1.4. I have landed jets with no hydraulics, no electrical power, and holes in the fuselage big enough to climb through. This is what I do. This is who I am. Now let go of the yoke. Marcus made a decision based purely on instinct. This woman, whoever she was calmer than any pilot he'd ever seen in an emergency. He let go. The plane immediately rolled harder to the left. In the cabin, passengers screamed louder. 65 degrees. 70 degrees. 75 degrees. Nadia let it roll. 80 degrees. 85 degrees. 90 degrees, the plane was now perpendicular to the ground, flying completely on its side. Marcus grabbed the edge of his seat, certain they were about to roll inverted and enter a death spiral. But at 95 degrees, just 5 degrees past completely sideways, Nadia did something that shouldn't have worked. She slammed her right foot down on the right rudder pedal with her full strength and body weight. At the exact same instant, she grabbed the right engine throttle and pushed it forward to maximum power while simultaneously pulling the left engine throttle back to idle. The right CFM56 engine, the only remaining engine on the aircraft, roared to full thrust, 27,300 pounds of force pushing the right side of the aircraft forward. The left side, with no engine, had zero thrust. The asymmetric thrust created a powerful yawing motion, the nose wanted to swing to the left, away from the powerful engine. But Nadia had also applied full right rudder, which created its own yawing force in the opposite direction. The two forces, engine asymmetry and rudder input, created a complex aerodynamic effect that induced a rolling moment in the opposite direction from the wing-induced roll. The plane stopped rolling at 95 degrees. It hung there, completely on its side, suspended for one terrifying second that felt like an hour. Then it rolled back toward level. 85 degrees. 75 degrees. 60 degrees. Marcus stared in absolute shock. What, how did you? Nadia was making constant tiny adjustments, her hands moving across the controls in a blur. Asymmetric thrust creates yaw, she said, her voice perfectly calm and clinical. Yaw creates roll moment through adverse yaw effects. I counteract missing wings roll moment with engine-induced roll moment in opposite direction. They balance. That shouldn't work on a 737. It doesn't. Not in normal flight envelope. But we are not in normal flight envelope. We are flying at edge of aerodynamic possibility. Same techniques I used on Soviet prototype aircraft with missing control surfaces. She stabilized the plane at 20 degrees of bank to the right, not level, but controllable. They were still descending at 1,400 feet per minute. Still falling. But no longer rolling out of control. Marcus looked at the altimeter. 17,000 feet. They'd lost 5,000 feet in less than 2 minutes. Nadia keyed the radio, her voice steady and professional. Mayday, mayday, mayday. United 447. Mid-air collision with unidentified object. Left wing completely severed. Captain deceased. First officer and passenger pilot attempting to control aircraft. Aircraft is marginally controllable. Using asymmetric thrust. Descending through 17,000 feet. Request immediate vectors to suitable landing site with extended runway. There was a long silence on the radio. Then, from Los Angeles Center, United 447. Did you say left wing severed? Affirmative. Wing sheared off at wing root. Structural failure complete. We are flying on single wing with asymmetric thrust and rudder control only. We cannot maintain altitude. What is nearest airport with runway longer than 10,000 feet? Another pause. Nadia could almost hear the controller's brain trying to process what she was saying. United 447, stand by. We're consulting with supervisors. We've never. I understand this is unusual, Nadia said calmly. But I need vectors now. We are descending. Time is critical. At Edwards Air Force Base in California's Mojave Desert, 90 miles west of Flight 447's position, the Air Traffic Control Center received the emergency transmission. The senior controller on duty, a retired Air Force sergeant named Tom Reeves, immediately activated the emergency protocols. Within seconds, he had scrambled F-16 fighters from the base's alert hangar and ordered Black Hawk helicopters to launch for visual reconnaissance. 6 UH-60 Black Hawks lifted off from Edwards within 4 minutes of the Mayday call. Lieutenant Colonel Jake "Viper" Harrison, 42 years old, 20 years in the Army, 3,500 flight hours in Black Hawks, was piloting the lead helicopter. He climbed rapidly to intercept altitude while listening to the radio traffic. When he heard a woman's voice announce, "Colonel Nadia Volkov," his hands tightened on the controls. "Holy shit," he breathed. His co-pilot, Chief Warrant Officer Sarah Chen, looked at him. "What? You know her?" "Not personally. But I know who she is. Everyone in military aviation above a certain clearance level knows who she is." "Who?" "Nadia Volkov. Call sign Raven. Russian defector. Best test pilot the Russians ever produced. She defected in 2016 with classified Su-57 fighter specs. She's been in witness protection ever since. And she's on that United flight. Apparently. And if she says she can fly asymmetric, you better believe her. I read the classified debrief reports after her defection. She logged over 800 hours flying deliberately damaged aircraft. She's landed jets that had no business being airborne. Jake keyed the military frequency. "Edwards Command, this is Viper Lead. I'm familiar with Colonel Volkov's background. If she says she can control that 737, she probably can. Requesting permission to form protective escort." Edwards Command came back immediately. "Viper Lead, approved. We're also scrambling F-16s. Be aware, if Colonel Volkov is on that aircraft, this may not be an accident. Treat this as a potential hostile action situation." That made Jake's blood run cold. If the Russians had tried to kill Nadia Volkov with a mid-air collision, they might try again. "Copy that, Command. Viper flight, form protective circle around United 447. Eyes open for any threats." Within 8 minutes, 6 Black Hawks were flying in formation around the crippled 737. Jake maneuvered his helicopter alongside the United jet and got his first visual confirmation. What he saw made his stomach drop. The Boeing 737's left wing was completely gone. Not damaged. Not hanging by a thread. Completely severed, with only a ragged stump of torn metal where 40 feet of wing should have been. Fuel was streaming from the severed hydraulic lines, vaporizing in the slipstream. The plane was flying at a pronounced bank angle to the right, constantly adjusting, constantly on the edge of losing control. "Dear God," Sarah Chen whispered. "How is that thing still in the air?" "Because Raven is flying it," Jake said. "And she's the only human being alive who knows how." He switched to the emergency frequency. "United 447, this is Viper Lead, U.S. Army Black Hawk. Colonel Volkov, we know who you are. We're forming protective escort around you. We'll guide you to Edwards Air Force Base. Longest runway in the continental United States. Best chance for landing this." Nadia's voice came back, still calm and focused. Viper lead, acknowledged. I need precise vectors to Edwards and I need all emergency equipment on standby. This aircraft is barely controllable. Landing will be extremely difficult. Survival probability is uncertain. Copy that, Raven. Edwards runway is 15,000 feet of reinforced concrete. Built for space shuttle landings. If anything can handle this, it's Edwards. And Raven? You're not alone up here. We've got you. There was a brief pause. Then, thank you, Viper lead. It is good to not be alone. Jake could hear the weight of 8 years of hiding in her voice. 8 years of looking over her shoulder. 8 years of waiting for Russia to find her. Today they'd found her. And today she was going to prove that she was worth every ounce of effort it took to protect her. For the next 22 minutes, Nadia Volkov kept United Flight 447 in the air using techniques that violated every principle of conventional aviation. She was continuously adjusting multiple controls simultaneously. Engine thrust, she varied the right engine between 60% and 95% power every few seconds, sometimes multiple times per second. Too much power and the asymmetric thrust would roll the plane right. Too little and they'd lose airspeed and stall. Rudder input, she was constantly moving her feet on the rudder pedals, full right rudder, then neutral, then right again, then neutral again, in a complex rhythm that Marcus couldn't follow. Bank angle, she never tried to fly level. Instead, she maintained a constant 10 to 20 degree bank to the right, using the bank angle itself as an aerodynamic counterforce to the missing left wing. Airspeed, she kept the speed locked at exactly 210 knots. Any faster and the structural stress on the damaged wing root might tear the fuselage apart. Any slower and they'd approach stall speed and fall from the sky. Marcus watched her hands moving across the controls in what seemed like random patterns but was actually a deeply complex dance with physics. You're making thousands of tiny adjustments every minute, he said. How are you even thinking fast enough to do this? I'm not thinking, Nadia said. Thinking is too slow. I'm feeling. The airplane talks to you through the controls. You feel pressure changes in the yoke. Vibrations in the rudder pedals. Changes in engine sound. I flew damaged prototypes for 15 years. You learn to listen to aircraft. Learn to feel what it needs before it knows it needs it. The plane shuddered violently, a deep, structural vibration that rattled their teeth. Marcus checked the altimeter. 14,000 feet. They'd started at 22,000. They'd lost 8,000 feet in 18 minutes. We're still descending, he said. Yes. Missing wing means missing lift. We have perhaps 40% less lift than normal. We cannot maintain altitude. Physics is physics. But we can control descent rate. We can choose where we fall. That is enough. She made a slight adjustment to the throttle. The descent rate changed from 1,400 feet per minute to 1,200 feet per minute. You're using the engine thrust to control descent rate. Engine thrust, bank angle, airspeed, all connected. Change one, must adjust others. Is like juggling while riding bicycle on tightrope. Very Russian approach to flying. Outside the cockpit windows, the 6 Black Hawks flew in formation around them, 2 ahead, 2 behind, 2 alongside. They were close enough that Marcus could see the pilots' faces. The protective formation served 2 purposes, visual guidance for Nadia, and protection against any follow-up attack. Because by now, everyone knew this wasn't an accident. At Edwards Air Force Base, FBI agents were already reviewing security footage from LAX. They'd identified the facial recognition hit on Nadia Volkov. They'd tracked the drone launch to a white van in the airport parking structure. They'd identified the van's registration, fake plates traced to a shell company in Delaware that was funded by accounts in Cyprus that were controlled by Russian intelligence. At the State Department in Washington, senior officials were having emergency meetings about how to respond to a Russian assassination attempt on American soil. At GRU headquarters in Moscow, 3 intelligence officers were watching American news channels in horror, realizing that their carefully planned, accidental, drone strike had failed spectacularly and was about to become an international incident. And in the cockpit of United Flight 447, Nadia Volkov was proving that you don't need 2 wings to fly, you just need physics, training, and the absolute refusal to let death win. At 12,000 feet, Nadia started planning her approach to Edwards. "Marcus, I need you to understand something," she said. "Landing will be very dangerous. Aircraft is unstable in all axes. We have no hydraulics for brakes or steering. When we touch down, we will likely skid, possibly tumble, possibly catch fire. You need to be ready to evacuate passengers immediately." "If we survive the landing," Marcus said quietly. Nadia looked at him. "We will survive. We did not fly 22 minutes on one wing just to die on runway. I refuse to allow it." Marcus found himself smiling despite the terror. "You refuse to allow it?" "Yes. Death must ask permission. Today I say no." Edwards AFB sits in the Mojave Desert, 100 miles northeast of Los Angeles. It's one of the most important military installations in the United States, home to the Air Force Test Pilot School, where America's best pilots learn to fly experimental aircraft. The base's main runway is legendary, 15,000 feet of reinforced concrete, originally built for the Space Shuttle program. It's the longest runway in the United States, designed to handle emergency landings of spacecraft and experimental jets that need every inch of stopping distance. Today it was going to face its greatest challenge, a one-winged commercial airliner attempting the impossible. Base Commander Colonel Richard "Hammer" Torres stood in the control tower, watching radar screens and listening to radio traffic. He'd been commanding Edwards for 3 years and had seen some crazy things: experimental jets with radical designs, spacecraft landing at 200 miles per hour, test pilots pushing aircraft to their absolute limits. But he'd never seen anything like this. "Get every emergency vehicle we have on that runway," he ordered. "Fire trucks, ambulances, crash rescue, foam trucks, everything. And I want medical helicopters on standby. If she pulls this off, we'll have injured passengers. If she doesn't." He didn't finish the sentence. Everyone knew what happened if she didn't pull it off. Within 10 minutes, Edwards AFB looked like a disaster movie set. 18 fire trucks lined the runway. 12 ambulances. 6 crash rescue vehicles. 4 foam trucks. Medical teams from the base hospital set up triage stations. Air Force pararescue teams, the legendary PJs, suited up and stood ready. News helicopters circled at a safe distance, their cameras broadcasting live footage to the entire world. CNN, Fox News, BBC, Al Jazeera, every major news organization on Earth was showing the same image: a Boeing 737 with one wing missing, escorted by 6 Black Hawk helicopters, descending slowly toward Edwards Air Force Base. The FAA had cleared all airspace within 50 miles. Commercial flights were diverted. Private aircraft were grounded. The sky belonged to Flight 447. At 10,000 feet, Nadia began her final approach. "Marcus," she said, "I need you to manage throttle for me. I call out power settings, you adjust immediately. My hands must stay on yoke and rudder. Understood?" "Understood," Marcus said. His voice was steady now. The initial terror had burned away, replaced by a strange calm. If he was going to die, at least he was going to die trying. "And Marcus? When we land, not if, when, we will hit hard. Very hard. Aircraft will likely skid, possibly tumble. Be ready to evacuate. Emergency exits, slides, get everyone out fast. Understand?" "I understand." "Good. Now let's show them how Raven lands." At 8,000 feet, Nadia started a wide, sweeping right turn to line up with Edward's runway. The turn was nothing like a normal approach. She had to bank hard right, almost 45 degrees, and use asymmetric thrust to swing the nose around. In the cabin, passengers felt the severe bank angle and grabbed their armrests. Some prayed. Some cried. Some held hands with strangers. A few passengers had figured out from listening to the flight attendants that the woman now flying the plane wasn't a crew member, she was a passenger who'd somehow taken control. The businessman from seat 9B was telling everyone who would listen that the woman who'd been sitting next to him was apparently some kind of Russian superpilot. Nobody believed him until they looked out the left side windows and saw that the wing was completely missing. Then they believed everything. At 6,000 feet, Nadia rolled wings level, or as level as she could manage with one wing, which meant about 15 degrees of bank. Viper lead, I am beginning final approach, she transmitted. Thank you for escort. You may break off now. I do not want to risk your helicopters if this goes badly. Jake Harrison's voice came back immediately. Negative, Raven. We're staying with you all the way down. You don't fly alone. Not today. Nadia felt tears prick her eyes but blinked them away. No time for emotion. Only time for precision. At 4,000 feet, Marcus, flaps to 5 degrees. Marcus extended the flaps slightly. The plane shuddered but held together. At 3,000 feet, flaps to 15. More shuddering. The right wing groaned under the asymmetric load. But it held. At 2,000 feet, Nadia could see the runway clearly now, a long strip of concrete stretching across the desert floor, lined with emergency vehicles, every light on the base pointing at that single piece of pavement. Flaps to 25, she ordered. Flaps 25, Marcus confirmed. The plane dropped faster now. Nadia compensated with a burst of engine power. At 1,000 feet, landing gear down. Marcus hit the gear lever. They waited. 3 seconds. 5 seconds. 3 green lights illuminated on the panel. Gear down and locked, Marcus said, relief flooding his voice. Good. Now full flaps. Full flaps deployed. At 500 feet, Nadia was fighting every second to keep the plane stable. Her hands were moving so fast across the yoke that they were almost a blur. Tiny adjustments. Constant corrections. Reading the airplane through her fingertips. At 300 feet, she spoke calmly to the passengers via the intercom, this is the pilot. Brace for impact. Heads down, arms crossed. We are landing now. At 200 feet, the desert floor rushed up to meet them. At 100 feet, Nadia reduced power slightly. At 50 feet, Marcus, reduce right engine to 40%. 40%. At 30 feet, brace. This will be very rough. The Black Hawks peeled off, giving the 737 clear space. At 10 feet, Nadia let the plane drop. The right main landing gear, the only gear that could touch because of the severe bank angle, slammed into the concrete at 180 miles per hour. The impact was brutal. Violent. The landing gear strut, designed to handle vertical loads of perhaps 100,000 pounds, was suddenly supporting the entire weight of a 175,000-pound aircraft hitting at an angle. The strut collapsed immediately. Metal screamed. Sparks exploded in a shower of orange and white. The plane tipped farther right. The right wing scraped the runway. The wing tip dug in, and for one terrifying moment it looked like the aircraft would cartwheel. But Nadia had cut all engine power the instant before touchdown. She deployed full spoilers on the right wing to kill every bit of remaining lift. The plane didn't cartwheel. Instead, it skidded sideways down the runway on its belly, the destroyed right wing and the torn left wing root both grinding against concrete. The sound was indescribable, tearing metal, breaking composite materials, the shriek of aluminum on concrete at 150 miles per hour. Inside the cabin, passengers were thrown against their seatbelts. Overhead bins exploded. Luggage flew. The emergency oxygen generators sparked and smoked. But the plane was slowing. 140 miles per hour. 120, 100. 80. It skidded for 2,800 feet, more than half a mile, leaving a trail of torn metal, rubber, and fuel vapor. 60 miles per hour. 40, 20. Finally, 3,200 feet from the initial touchdown point, United Flight 447 ground to a stop. For 3 seconds, there was absolute silence. Then the cabin erupted. Screaming. Crying. Praying. Thanking God. Thanking each other. Strangers hugging strangers. The flight attendants shouting commands, evacuate. Evacuate. Leave everything. Get out now. Emergency exits popped open. Slides deployed. Passengers poured out of the aircraft onto the hot desert concrete. In the cockpit, Nadia sat motionless, hands still on the controls, covered in Captain Mitchell's blood. Marcus looked at her. His face was streaked with tears and sweat and he was shaking from head to toe. You just landed a one-winged 737, he whispered. You just did something that's aerodynamically impossible. You just saved 183 people who should be dead. Nadia didn't respond immediately. She was staring at her hands on the controls, trying to process what had just happened. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely audible, we landed it. You trusted me. That was hardest part. And Sarah Mitchell flew first half. I only finished what she started. Emergency crews swarmed the wreckage. Firefighters sprayed foam on the hot metal. Paramedics helped passengers down the slides. Air Force medics climbed into the cockpit. Ma'am, we need to get you out, one of them said gently to Nadia. She nodded and unbuckled. Her legs almost gave out when she stood, the adrenaline was wearing off and her body was realizing what it had just been through. The medics helped her down the emergency slide and onto the runway. As she stepped onto the concrete, 6 Black Hawk helicopters landed in formation nearby. The pilots climbed out and walked toward her. Lieutenant Colonel Jake Harrison led them. When he reached Nadia, all 6 pilots snapped to attention and saluted. Nadia, covered in blood, shaking from exhaustion, tears finally streaming down her face, returned the salute. Colonel Volkov, Jake said, his voice thick with emotion, that was the greatest piece of flying I have ever witnessed in my entire career. You just did something that will be studied in aviation schools for the next 100 years. Nadia's voice cracked. Sarah Mitchell flew first half. She died protecting her passengers. I just finished her flight. She'd be proud of you, Jake said. We're all proud of you. Behind them, 183 passengers and crew members were being triaged by medical teams. Broken bones. Cuts and bruises. A few concussions. One heart attack that the paramedics were working on. But everyone was alive. Everyone except Captain Sarah Mitchell, whose body was still in the cockpit, still strapped into her seat, still at her post. Within 6 hours, the FBI had the complete picture. Special Agent Maria Castellanos stood in a hangar at Edwards AFB where the wreckage of Flight 447 had been taken. She was looking at the drone fragments that had been collected from the desert. Chinese manufacture, the forensic tech told her. DJI Matt Rice 600 frame, heavily modified. Russian electronics package. GPS guidance system programmed with Flight 447's exact flight path. This wasn't a malfunction, Agent Castellanos. This was a precision strike. Tell me about the van. Founded in LAX long-term parking. Registered to a Delaware shell company funded through a bank in Cyprus. We traced the Cyprus accounts, they're controlled by a known GRU front operation. Inside the van we found the drone control station, encrypted communications equipment, and a laptop with facial recognition software running against TSA security camera feeds. They were hunting her, Maria said quietly. For 8 years. The software logged over 3 million faces. This morning it got a hit, Nadia Volkov, checking in for United 447. They had 47 minutes to launch a drone strike. They almost pulled it off. What about the operatives? We arrested 3 Russian nationals at a safe house in Burbank. 2 GRU intelligence officers and 1 technical specialist. They're claiming diplomatic immunity. Too bad for them. Attempted murder of 184 people on U.S. soil. They're not diplomats, they're terrorists. Within 48 hours of the incident, the State Department expelled 12 Russian diplomats from the United States. Russia retaliated by expelling 12 American diplomats from Moscow. The UN Security Council held an emergency session. NATO condemned Russia's actions as an act of aviation terrorism. The 3 arrested GRU operatives were charged with 184 counts of attempted murder. Nadia was placed in enhanced witness protection with a full Secret Service detail. The FBI moved her to a secure location that even her lawyer didn't know. 5 days after the crash, Nadia sat at a press conference in Washington, D.C. First Officer Marcus Webb sat beside her. Behind them stood FBI Director Sarah Haynes and NTSB Chairman Robert Morrison. The room was packed with journalists from around the world. Cameras everywhere. The press conference was being broadcast live in 140 countries. Nadia wore a simple dark blue suit. She looked tired but composed. The blood was gone from her hair and skin, but the weight of what had happened showed in her eyes. A reporter from CNN asked the first question, "Colonel Volkov, can you explain to us how you managed to fly an aircraft with 1 wing missing? Every aviation expert we've consulted says it should be impossible." Nadia spoke carefully, her Russian accent making each word precise. For 15 years in Russian Air Force, I was test pilot at Gromov Flight Research Institute. My job was to fly prototype aircraft that were deliberately damaged to test failure modes. Missing ailerons. Asymmetric thrust. Damaged control surfaces. Hydraulic failures. Structural damage. Russian aerospace philosophy believes that if you understand exactly how aircraft fails, you can save it when it should not be savable. Can you describe what you did specifically? I used technique called asymmetric thrust vectoring combined with adverse yaw control. When aircraft has 1 wing missing, remaining wing creates rolling moment toward missing side. To counteract, I used full power from remaining engine to create yaw, which induces opposite roll moment. Simultaneously, I maintained constant bank angle to right and used differential throttle control to maintain pitch stability. Is like balancing on tightrope while juggling, must constantly adjust multiple variables simultaneously. A reporter from the BBC, "Were you afraid?" Nadia paused. Yes. I was terrified. But fear is not excuse for failure. 183 people were on that aircraft. Their lives depended on me remaining calm and thinking clearly. So I put fear in box, closed box, and did my job. A reporter from Al Jazeera, "Russia tried to kill you today. Are you angry?" I am. Nadia searched for the word. I am disappointed. I served Russia faithfully for 15 years. I risked my life testing their aircraft. When I defected, I did so because I could no longer serve government that I believed was corrupt. Russia had 8 years to accept this. Instead, they sent drone to kill me and 183 innocent people. So yes, I am disappointed in country I once loved. A reporter from Reuters, "What happens now?" Nadia looked at FBI Director Haynes, who nodded. I will testify against Russian intelligence operatives who attempted this assassination. I will continue my work as aerospace consultant for Boeing. And I will. She paused. I will not hide anymore. For 8 years I have lived in shadows, afraid, looking over shoulder. Today fear became reality. But I survived. 183 people survived. And I learned something important: when you stop hiding and face fear directly, fear loses its power. Does that mean you'll fly commercially again? Nadia smiled, a small, sad smile. Yes. Because if I hide, Russia wins. If I let fear control my life, Russia wins. And Raven does not surrender. Raven flies through storms. The room erupted with more questions, but FBI Director Haynes raised her hand. One final statement, she said. Colonel Volkov will be under federal protection for the foreseeable future. Any attempt to harm her will be treated as an attack on a federally protected witness and will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. The United States does not tolerate assassination attempts on our soil, regardless of who orders them. 8 days after the crash, Captain Sarah Mitchell was buried at Arlington National Cemetery with full honors. Her family had requested it, and given that she had died essentially in combat, killed by a foreign military asset while protecting American civilians, the request was granted. Nadia attended the funeral, flanked by Secret Service agents. She stood in the back during the service, not wanting to draw attention. But when the ceremony ended and people were filing past the casket, Sarah's daughter Emily, the college graduate Sarah had been so excited to celebrate, spotted Nadia and walked over. Emily was 22, red-eyed from crying, wearing a simple black dress. "You're Colonel Volkov," she said. "Yes," Nadia said quietly. "I am so sorry for your loss. Your mother was excellent pilot and brave woman." "She was going to retire next year," Emily said, tears streaming down her face. "She had the date picked out and everything. She was going to travel, spend time with family, finally relax. She saved many lives," Nadia said. "When wing was hit, your mother fought to control aircraft for nearly 2 minutes while I was getting to cockpit. Without her strength, aircraft would have rolled inverted before I arrived. Everyone would have died. She gave me time I needed. She was hero." Emily was sobbing now. Did she suffer?" Nadia chose kindness over truth. "No. It was instant. She felt nothing." Emily threw her arms around Nadia and wept into her shoulder. Nadia held her, this young woman who had lost her mother because Russian intelligence had tried to kill a defector. When Emily finally pulled back, she said, "Thank you for saving everyone else. My mom would have wanted that. She always said her job was to protect her passengers, no matter what. She did her job perfectly," Nadia said. "I will make sure everyone knows this." Boeing Test Facility, Seattle, Washington. 6 months after the crash. Nadia stood in a large training room filled with flight simulators. 30 commercial airline pilots from United, Delta, American, and Southwest sat in chairs facing a massive screen. She wore a Boeing flight suit now, with a patch on her shoulder that read, Chief Test Pilot, Asymmetric Flight Systems Division. Boeing had created an entire new division just for her. Her job: develop training protocols for emergency asymmetric flight control and teach commercial pilots how to handle catastrophic damage scenarios. On the screen behind her was a simulation of United Flight 447's exact damage scenario. "Good morning," Nadia said to the pilots. "My name is Colonel Nadia Volkov. 6 months ago, I landed Boeing 737 with left wing completely severed. Today, I will teach you how to do same thing." A pilot from Delta raised his hand. "With all due respect, Colonel, every expert says what you did was impossible. How can you teach us to do the impossible?" Nadia smiled. "What I did was not impossible. It was improbable. There is difference. Impossible means physics does not allow it. Improbable means physics allows it, but is very difficult and requires perfect execution. I am here to make improbable into teachable." She clicked a remote. The screen showed complex aerodynamic diagrams. "First, you must understand, aircraft wants to fly. This is fundamental truth. Wings generate lift. Engines generate thrust. Control surfaces guide direction. When damage occurs, aircraft does not become unflyable, it becomes differently flyable. Your job is to discover new way to fly damaged aircraft. She walked to a simulator. In next 6 weeks, you will learn what I call Volkov protocol. This includes: first, asymmetric thrust management. How to use engine power differential to create yaw and roll moments. Second, adverse yaw utilization. How to use rudder input combined with bank angle to maintain directional control. Third, energy management. How to control descent rate when you cannot maintain altitude. Fourth, emergency landing procedures for asymmetric configurations. Fifth, most important, mental preparation. How to remain calm when every instinct screams that you are about to die. She climbed into the simulator. Now, let me show you. This simulator is programmed with exact conditions from Flight 447. Watch carefully. The simulation began. On the screen, the left wing disappeared. Alarms blared. The aircraft rolled left. Nadia's hands moved across the controls. The pilots watched in silence as she demonstrated each technique, explaining every input, every adjustment, every decision. The simulated aircraft rolled back to controllable flight. Descended. Lined up with a runway. Landed hard but successfully. When the simulation ended, the room was absolutely silent. Then one pilot started clapping. Then another. Then all 30 were on their feet, applauding. Nadia stepped out of the simulator and faced them. "What you just saw took me 15 years to learn," she said. "I will teach you in 6 weeks. It will not be easy. You will fail many simulations before you succeed. But when you are in real cockpit with real emergency and real lives depending on you, you will remember this training. And you will save those lives." Over the next 12 months, Nadia trained 847 commercial pilots in asymmetric flight techniques. The Volkov protocol became mandatory training for all commercial pilots at major U.S. airlines. Boeing incorporated her techniques into flight control software for their next-generation aircraft. The FAA created new emergency procedures based on her methods. Exactly 1 year after the crash, Nadia drove to Los Angeles International Airport. She wore jeans and a casual jacket. No disguise. No attempt to hide. She checked in for United Flight 1847, LAX to Denver. The same route as Flight 447. The ticket agent recognized her name. "Ms. Volkov? Are you the Nadia Volkov?" "Yes," Nadia said calmly. "Oh my God. It's an honor to check you in. And just so you know, the crew on today's flight asked specifically to meet you if you're comfortable with that." Of course. At the gate, the flight crew was waiting. Captain Jennifer Walsh and First Officer David Kim. "Colonel Volkov," Captain Walsh said, shaking her hand. "I completed your asymmetric training last month. It was the most intense flying I've ever done, but also the most important. Thank you for teaching us." "You are welcome," Nadia said. "I hope you never need to use it." "So do I. But if I do, I'll be ready." Nadia boarded the flight. Seat 9A. Same seat as before. As the plane taxied to the runway, she felt the familiar nervousness. For 8 years she had hidden. Then for 1 year after the crash, she had been in protective custody, never flying commercial. This was her first voluntary commercial flight since the assassination attempt. The plane accelerated down the runway and lifted into the sky. Nadia looked out the window at the left wing, intact, perfect, beautiful. And she smiled. 2 years after the crash. The Volkov Protocol has been taught to over 3,000 commercial pilots worldwide. 0 fatalities have occurred in similar asymmetric damage scenarios since its implementation. Nadia Volkov received the FAA's Distinguished Service Medal. She received the Collier Trophy for the greatest achievement in aviation. She was awarded honorary doctorate degrees from MIT, Caltech, and Embry-Riddle. United Airlines painted, in memory of Captain Sarah Mitchell, on the fuselage of a new 737. 5 years after the crash, Nadia published a textbook, Asymmetric Flight, Managing Catastrophic Damage. The book became required reading in aviation schools worldwide. She testified before Congress about aviation security and foreign threats to civil aviation. Her testimony led to enhanced screening protocols for commercial drones near airports. She became a U.S. citizen in a ceremony at the White House. 10 years after the crash, a Hollywood movie, Raven, Flight 447, told her story. Though she insisted they focus on Captain Mitchell's sacrifice, she retired from Boeing and opened a flight school specializing in emergency procedures. First Officer Marcus Webb, now a captain, sent her a photo every year on the anniversary. Still alive because of you. The 3 Russian GRU operatives were convicted and sentenced to life in federal prison. Russia officially denied any involvement, but privately, the assassination program targeting defectors was quietly shut down. Edwards Air Force Base. Anniversary Ceremony. A monument stands near the runway where Flight 447 landed, a twisted piece of the aircraft's left-wing root, mounted on a granite base. The inscription reads: United Flight 447. June 8, 2024. In memory of Captain Sarah Mitchell. In honor of Colonel Nadia Raven Volkov. 183 souls saved by courage, skill, and the refusal to surrender. When physics said impossible, they said, watch us fly. Nadia stands before the monument, now 56 years old, gray in her hair, still strong, still sharp. Lieutenant Colonel Jake Harrison, now General Jake Harrison, commander of Edwards AFB, stands beside her. 15 years, he says. Seems like yesterday and a lifetime ago at the same time. Yes, Nadia agrees. Sometimes I still dream about it. The blood. The alarms. The feeling of aircraft rolling inverted. But then I wake up and remember, we lived. All of us lived. Because of you. Because of all of us. Sarah Mitchell. Marcus Webb. Your Black Hawks. The emergency crews. Everyone played part. A group of student pilots from the Air Force Test Pilot School approaches. They've been studying Flight 447 as a case study in extreme emergency procedures. Colonel Volkov, their instructor says. Would you be willing to answer a few questions for my students? Of course. A young pilot, barely 25, asks, Ma'am, when you were flying that plane, were you thinking about the physics and calculations, or was it instinct? Nadia considers the question carefully. Both. And neither. When you fly damaged aircraft for many years, physics becomes instinct. You don't think I need 23% more thrust and 15 degrees more bank angle. You feel aircraft needs more power, needs more tilt. Your hands do calculations faster than your brain can think them. Is like musician playing complex piano piece, they don't think about each note, they feel the music. Were you afraid you'd fail? Every second. But fear and skill are not opposites. Fear keeps you sharp. Fear keeps you focused. The key is to not let fear make decisions. You acknowledge fear, you respect it, but you don't obey it. Another student. What would you say to someone who faces an impossible situation? Nadia smiles. I would say, impossible is opinion, not fact. Physics is fact. If physics allows something, even if probability is very small, then it is not impossible, it is merely very difficult. And humans are very good at doing difficult things when we must. As the students walk away, Jake turns to Nadia. You changed aviation, you know. Before Flight 447, loss of major wing structure was considered unsurvivable. Now there's a protocol. Now there's hope. Sarah Mitchell changed aviation, Nadia corrects. She showed that pilot's job is to protect passengers no matter what. I just finished what she started. They stand in silence, watching the sun set over the Mojave Desert, the same desert where 15 years ago a one-winged 737 skidded to a stop and proved that sometimes, against all odds, impossible becomes merely improbable. And improbable becomes survivable. And survivable becomes legendary.